From this point, I write the following events here from memory. It defies the imagination and would seem all but madness if it had not happened. The radio men and I are taken from the aircraft and we are received in a most cordial manner. We were boarded on a small platform-like conveyance with no wheels. It moves us towards the glowing city with the great swiftness. As we approach, the city seems to be made of crystal metal. Soon as we arrive at a large building that is the type I have never seen before. It appears to be right out of design boards of Frank Lloyd Wright, or perhaps more correctly out of Buck Rogers' setting. We are given some type of warm beverage which tasted like nothing I've ever savoured before. It is delicious. After about 10 minutes, two of our wondrous appearing hosts come to our quarters and announce that I am to accompany them, but I have no choice to comply. I leave my radio men behind and we walk a short distance and enter into what seems to be an elevator. We descended downwards. For some moments the machine stops and the door swiftly lifts slightly upward. We then proceed down along halfway. This is lit by rose-coloured light that seems to be emanating from the very walls themselves, one of these being motions for us to stop before a great door. Over the door is an inscription that I cannot read. The great door slides noiselessly open and I am beckoned to enter. One of my hosts speaks. "Have no fear, Admiral. You are to have an audience with the Master." I step inside and my eyes adjust to the beautiful coloration that seems to be filling the room completely. Then I begin to see my surroundings. What greeted my eyes is the most beautiful sight of my entire existence. It is in fact beautiful, too beautiful and wondrous to describe. It is exquisite and delicate. I do not think there exists a human term that can describe in any detail with justice. My thoughts are interrupted in a cordial manner by a warm voice with melodiously quality. "I bid you to welcome to our domain." A man with delicate features and with the etching of years upon his face. He seated at a long table. He motions me to sit down at one of the chairs. After I am seated, he places his fingertips together and smiles. He speaks softly again and conveys the following: "We have let you here because you are a noble character of a well-known on the surface world, Admiral." "Surface world?" I half gasp under my breath. "Yes," the Master replies with a smile. "You are in the domain of the Ariani, the inner world of Earth. We shall not delay your mission, and you will be safely escorted back to the surface and for a distance beyond. But now, Admiral, I shall tell you why you have been summoned here. Our interest rightly begins just after your race exploded the first atomic bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan. It was that alarming that we sent out our flying machines, the Fluggelrads to your surface world to investigate what your race had done. This is of course past history now, my dear Admiral, but I must continue on. You see, we have never interfered before in your race's wars and barbarity, but we must for you have learned to tamper with certain power, and this is not for man, namely that of atomic energy. Our emissaries have already delivered messages to the power of your world, yet they do not heed. Now you have been chosen to be the witness here that our world does exist. You see, our culture and science is many of thousands of years beyond your race, Admiral," I interrupted. "But what does that have to do with me, sir?" The Master's eyes seemed to penetrate deeply into my mind, and after studying me for a few moments he replied, "Your race has now reached the point of no return. For there are those among you who would destroy your very world rather than relinquish their power as they know it." Sounds like times we're living in now. "In 1945 and afterwards we tried to contact your race, but efforts were met mostly hostility. Our Fluggelrads were fired upon, yes, even pursued with malice and animosity by your fighter planes. So now I say to you, my son, there's a great storm gathering in your world, a black fury that will spread itself for many years. There will be no answer to your arms. There will be no safety in your science. I may rage on until every flower of your culture is trampled. It may rage on until every flower of your culture is trampled. All human things are levelled in vast chaos. Your recent war is only the prelude of what is to come for your race. We here see it more clearly with each hour. Do I say am I mistaken? No, I answer. It's happened once before. Dark Ages came and they lasted for more than 500 years. Yes, my son, replied the master. The Dark Ages will come now for your race and will cover Earth like a pall. But I believe that some of your race will live through the storm. Beyond that I cannot say. We see a great distance, a new world simmering from the ruins of your race, seeking its lost and legendary treasures, and they will be here, my son, safe in our keeping. When its time arrives, we shall come forth again and help you revive your culture and your race. Perhaps then you will have learned the futility of war and its strife, and after that time, certain of your culture, the science will be returned for your race to begin anew. You, my son, are to return to the surface world with this message. With these closing words, our meeting seemed at an end. I stood for a moment as in a dream, but yet I know this was reality, and for some strange reason I bowed slightly, either out of respect or humility, I do not know which. Suddenly, I was again aware that the two beautiful hosts who had brought me here were at my side. Yes, Admiral, the emotions one. I turned once more before leaving and back towards the master. A gentle smile was etched on his delicate, ancient face. Farewell, my son, he spoke. He then gestured with a lovely, slender hand motion of peace, and our meeting was truly ended. Quickly we walked back to the great door of the master's chamber and once again entered into the elevator. The door slid silently downwards and we were once again going upwards. One of my hosts spoke again. We must now make haste, Admiral, as the master's desires you delay no longer your scheduled timetable, and you must return with his message to your race. I said nothing. All of this was almost beyond belief, and once again my thoughts were interrupted as we stopped. I entered the room and I was again with my radio man. He had the anxious expression on his face. As I approached I said, "It's alright, Howie, it's alright." The two beings motioned us towards the awaiting conveyance as we boarded and soon arrived back at the aircraft. The engines were idling and we boarded immediately. The whole atmosphere seemed to change from now on. A certain air of urgency. After the cargo door was closed, the aircraft was immediately lifted by an unseen force. We had reached an altitude of 27,000 feet. Two of the aircraft were alongside for some distance, guiding us on our way. I must state here the airspeed indicator registered no reading, yet we were moving at a very rapid rate. 215 hours, a radio message came through. "We are leaving you now, Admiral. Your controls are free. Auf Wiedersehen." We watched for a moment as the Fluggerades disappeared into the pale blue sky. The aircraft suddenly felt as though caught in a sharp downward. For a moment we quickly recovered her. We did not speak to each other for some time. Each man has his thoughts. Entry log continues. 2200 hours. We are over a vast area of ice snow and approximately 17 minutes from base camp. We radio, they respond. We all report conditions normal, base normal. Express relief at our re-established contact. We land smoothly at base camp. So on March the 11th, which is 3/11/33/1947, another cryptic year, I have just entered the staff meeting at the Pentagon. I have stated fully my discovery and the message from the master. As I duly recorded, the president has been advised that I am now detained for several hours, 6 hours and 39 minutes to be exact. I am interviewed intently by top security forces and the medical team. It was an ordeal. I am placed under strict control via the national security provision.
don't think it will be for long, because of this intense interest on the part of other nations and this nation.
Well, Admiral Byrd, are private expeditions a thing of the past? Is expedition and exploration, making expedition and exploration now purely a government function because of the tremendous cost and organization?
No, I don't think so. I think down south it may be more or less a thing of the past, but not other expeditions that go. There's a lot of them go north now.
This latest expedition now on the way is a government expedition, I take it.
Yes, that's the government.
Admiral Byrd, may I ask you, is there a great difference between the top of the world and the bottom of the world?
There is. Now, the North Pole is the center of an ocean 10,000 feet deep. The South Pole, the center of a plateau 10,000 feet high. The North Polar Sea is surrounded by continents slightly frozen. The Antarctic continent is surrounded by a belt of ice, frozen seas of at least 1,200 miles thick. Now, the south is a plateau. It gets in some places 14,000 feet up. I've been over areas about 13,000, and it's a little bit chilly up there. So there's that big difference between the top and bottom of the world. The north really isn't very cold up there on the Arctic Ocean.
Not compared to the south. Admiral Byrd, we often hear it said that our young Americans now aren't as hardy as their forefathers. Do you think that Americans do measure up to the standards, the physical standards and morale standards of the past?
I do. I don't believe that. I think they're just as hardy.
Well, what would you say was the most valuable factor on expedition? Is it morale, or physical courage, or is it sheer equipment?
Well, I've always thought that loyalty was by far the most important trait. The British told me that when I first went down in 28, that I couldn't possibly get through the winter night without a mutiny if I took more than 20 men. But to serve science, I had to take 42 men. Then I took 56 the next time, and so on. So, and I did find that loyalty was the most important thing during the winter night when it's very hard on your nerves. I think that's best trait.
Well, that's a very valuable characteristic at any time. Well, thank you very much, Admiral Byrd. It's been a great pleasure to have you here tonight.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Yes.
The opinions expressed on the Longines Chronoscope were those of the speakers. The editorial board for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope was Larry Lusser and Kenneth Crawford. Our distinguished guest was Admiral Richard E. Byrd.
At the end of the Second World War, the extraterrestrials ensured that the technology was returned from Earth back to these cities. They understood that the Dark Age had not yet reached its peak. The technology was returned by 30 submarines through a large commando action.
Okay, let's pick up the scenario. We were originally talking about the spiriting out of the two spacecraft out of Berlin before the Allies arrived. We said that they were put aboard two submarines. They spent 6 months at sea, and they finally landed in Argentina. Now, from that point, they were taken into Antarctica, into a section of Antarctica called Queen's Maud's Land. And there they disappeared, and they were not heard of for some time. Now, intelligence sources, and of course I was in the intelligence business at that time with the agency, reports indicated that they were in there and they were operative once again. Now, there was a major concern by world powers to go in and capture the technology and the two spacecraft which they knew were in Antarctica. And the intelligence reports indicated that one known as Admiral Byrd was to be recommissioned, and he was to be sent in there to retrieve the two saucers and also the technology and personnel associated with it. Later reports indicated that Admiral Byrd was given 8 months and unlimited funding to go in and pull this thing successfully off. But we also know that within 8 weeks he was totally defeated. Now, the supposition at that point was that there was an advanced civilization and technology, most probably alien, There were with the Third Reich and the SS who was in Antarctica, and that those great and developed technologies were used to defeat Admiral Byrd. And of course, as it turns out, even to date, they're still there. We never did successfully get them.
The stories that I've uncovered about the inner Earth is that very early on in the history of the Third Reich, the Nazi elite, and especially Hitler, were trying to establish contact with a civilization living in the inner Earth, which was considered an Aryan civilization of a lot more advanced nature than their brothers, lost brothers living on the surface of the planet. The Thule Society carries the name of the former capital of that civilization, someplace around present-day Greenland, before the previous polar shifts and before Greenland became under ice. Two expeditions were made in the late 30s, early 40s, one attempting to enter the North Polar water opening with a submarine, which proved unsuccessful. A second attempt was made to enter the land opening on the South Pole with an anti-gravity cigar-shaped device, basically a small prototype probably of the giant Andromeda space station that was developed later on by the SS, and it proved successful. The most interesting story is the one that I heard by an American living in Florida who claims to have spent 2 months in the city of New Berlin. This is a city that was developed into the inner Earth, and a part of the Germans from the South Polar colony were admitted by the inner Earthlings and were allowed to build that city there. Very strict admission procedures, no previous SS members, no previous concentration camp guards and so on were admitted. The rumor is that the present-day city of New Berlin is about 2 million people of population, that they have built there most of the buildings that Hitler's personal architect, Spee, was planning to build. They're traveling on Icelandic passports. They are basically the new master race that is probably planned by the Illuminati to repopulate the planet. And there is even a rumor that there is a New Berlin embassy in Washington on an unmarked floor of a high-rise building. You probably punch a code on the elevator buttons, and when the elevator stops on that floor and the doors open, you see the sign of New Berlin.
So when we look on Google, we see reports of a New Berlin embassy.
Lobby. The kids of the New Berliners study in major institutions around the globe. Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, Yale, and basically it is not a Nazi colony that is established in the hollow earth as an enemy of the present-day American and English Illuminati secret government. On the contrary, it is just basically the other side of the same coin. Some would even coin the new word, the Illuminati presence on the planet, that basically the World War II Nazis and the present-day Illuminatis in America are nothing more than the two sides of the same Illuminati coin. So basically this is a colony, a presence in the hollow earth that has been established with a shoulder-to-shoulder cooperation of the Russians and Americans, organized, orchestrated, and performed through the quiet cooperation of the Illuminati government.
After World War II, a military expedition under Admiral Byrd tried to recover the vanished technology. The extraterrestrials let him enter the inner Earth to the Golden City. They delivered a request message for disarmament to the government of the United States. Admiral Byrd had to remain silent until his death, but after he died, his nephew published his diary.
In my work with South African, Brazilian, and American geologists at the South Pole, it is clear that under the structures of ice, there are many layers of civilization, suggesting at one earlier point of time, when the conditions of the South Pole were different, Clearly, there was some type of civilization there. The evidences of huge dinosaur intelligence suggest that this was one of the possible places for the Garden of Eden. This, of course, is assuming that the shell of the Earth had a different north and south magnetic pole. And with the shifting of the pole, this region became suddenly very, very frigid. And thus, we do not see any evidences on the surface of these so-called earlier conditions of intelligence. However, I believe with the further exploration of the documents that both Admiral Byrd brought to the attention of the world after World War II, and the Brazilian Navy uncovered in 1961 with its subpole expedition, that extraterrestrial intelligence is also operated out of the area of the South Pole. In that sense, the South Pole is a connecting point with other civilizations, possible extrasolar gardens of paradise.
Nagas, also referred to as the reptoids, reptiloids, reptans, Homosaurus, lizard men, or the large-nosed greys. They play a significant role in the legends of India and Tibet, where they are considered by some to be demonical residents of a subterranean realm. They are described as being around 7 to 8 feet tall and of various colors, grotesque, but most often moldy greenish with scaled crocodilian skin. After a reputed battle in ancient times, between a pre-Scandinavian race from the Gobi region, and a reptiloid race based in Antarctica, the reptilians allegedly lost the battle for domination of the surface world, and were driven into underground networks in which they eventually developed aerial and space technology. The Nagas are said to have appeared at the birth of Gautama Siddhartha, who later became Buddha. B. The ancient well of Sheshana in Benares, India, is traditionally where the yoga aphorisms of Patanjali, a classical guide to students of yoga, was written. This well is said to be an entrance to one of the Nagas' underworld lairs. Nordics. Blonde, blue-eyed, angular faces. Although Nordics are humanoid and externally almost identical to humans, there are subtle differences in the Nordic alien physiology. Most of them are based on the living conditions. Their planets are extremely hot and dry, and have a low oxygen content in the atmosphere. They have a larger lung capacity than humans, and have a copper-based blood, in order to carry oxygen more efficiently. The eyes are protected by inner lids, and can allow them to see into the ultraviolet range of the spectrum. They have only 28 teeth, as they lack a back pair of molars. Their heads are longer than humans. Negamak, aka Nomopo. First known visit to Earth happened only in 1989. They abduct humans and exercise control over the minds of their captives, which they use for their own benefit. After the captives' release, reason unknown. They are also one of the oldest races. This is the race that most human governments fear when considering the future of humans. This race was the inspiration for the alien race in the movie Independence Day. Note from Petro and me. The ARB states the same thing about another race.
Here we have a rotating sphere of water about 25 millimeters in diameter, and inside this sphere are a whole bunch of little tiny air bubbles. And we will see what the angular acceleration due to rotation does to these air bubbles as a function of time. What you are observing are the bubbles moving to the center axis of rotation. As a function of time, they will form this rather tightly packed bubble core. These bubbles are kept from coalescing from a small amount of added surfactant to the water. Here we have a rotating sphere filled with bubbles and tea leaves, And as expected, the bubbles go to the center and the tea leaves go to the outside edge, along with a few chunks of orange peel. Here we have a rotating sphere with bubbles and chunks from breaking up a small vitamin tablet. And the bubbles go to the center core, but the vitamin chunks seem to stay in their location dispersed through the sphere. And from this we deduced that the vitamin chunks have a density near that of water.
Right now, I want to say a special thanks to Christian Kirolf in Canada for sending me over 100 photographs and the information which then led me into this investigation at the Antarctica. Here we can see all the photographs which Christian sent to me, unveiling some quite phenomenal stuff. I was fascinated by the findings. Now, we're seeing a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff in the photographs which you could not get to zoom in properly to pixelate while I was looking around on Google Maps. But we are seeing a lot of foliage, a lot of greenery. We are seeing submarines with guns pointing inland towards strange structures. We're seeing temples. This one in fact has got a temple on it. We've got UFOs, we've got pyramids. There's actually 2 pyramids so far which we found so far, 2 pyramids which are confirmed. Various entrances into what we're now saying Hollow Earth based on all the stuff. I've also left in every coordinate possible which I've used, and some others as well which I've found along my travels. They're all here for you. I am going to go live with this one pretty soon. As this video is uploaded, I'll be going live within 10-15 minutes, and then we're going to go over it all again and see what we can all find together. As I said, I've left all the coordinates in this for you here, so you can clearly use all the coordinates and we can all do this together. We can go on an expedition. We can all be like Admiral Birds with our laptops, because that's the future that we live in now. We don't have to sit here and read history books which are just a load of lies. His story, we cannot believe such one-sided accounts. We don't have to believe such one-sided accounts no more when we can come up with stuff like this and just show it to the masses. People may not believe us, people may laugh at us, but we know the truth and we're here digging the truth up every single day. This picture which we've just seen now, this one has in fact got a UFO in this inside of it all. This is Enchanted LifePath TV. Thanks for watching and speak soon.